Hi, ladies, and welcome to today's live on the truth about dairy. I am so excited to share this information with you today. As many of you know, I haven't been able to eat dairy for a long time, and I had to figure out my own way into that path because when I first became dairy-free, it was A, not cool to be dairy-free. B, there weren't a lot of dairy-free products out there, and C, I was from a dairy farm family, so the fact that I couldn't eat dairy was like, what is wrong with you? Well, I'll tell you what was wrong with me. Okay, so the reason why a lot of us, or I should say the reason why America has a ton of dairy products in it is because of the early European settlers and Europeans domesticated animals because they realized, hey, dairy is a good source of animal protein. So the Europeans started domesticating the animals and they got all the dairy products and they started making cool things with them like cheese and yogurt. Hi, Cheryl. And all the stuff that we all now love, right? So they started making the dairy. And the thing is that up until that point, most people could not process milk products after the age of about 4 because we're designed as mammals. As you've probably seen most mammals, they drink from their mother's milk for a certain amount of time and then they're weaned off and then they don't drink any milk anymore. They don't ever have dairy products after that. Well, that was the same thing with us mammals, that we typically weren't able to process milk products after a certain point. So for the Europeans who just domesticated the mammals to continue to produce milk products that we then ingested, most of us had a mutation occur within us that allowed us to continue to process that dairy afterwards. Now, I myself am not mutated. I do not have this ability to process the lactose. You need an enzyme called lactase to do it, and I either don't have it or I don't have enough of it. But a lot of Europeans did. As a matter of fact, about 85% of people of European origin can tolerate dairy products. Now the question is, should we? Just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? But just kind of give you breakdown by culture, and I'm going to go, because I'm an American, I'm going to go through the American statistics. So Asian Americans are 95% lactose intolerant. So only 5% of Asian Americans truly can digest milk products. Native Americans, it's 74%. African Americans, it's 70%. Mexican Americans are 53%, and again, Caucasians, 15% of us are lactose intolerant. And the reason I bring up those statistics is because if you are lactose intolerant or if you suspect you're lactose intolerant, I want you to know you're not unusual. You're actually, like most of the world, I think what did I write down? 75% of the world's adult population is lactose intolerant because again, we weren't actually designed to have milk after the age of 4, and we weren't really designed to have milk from other mammals, right? But be that as it may, we have a lot of good things, right? That have milk in them. Whipped cream, ice cream, yogurt, all kinds of cheeses. I mean, France has over 400 official cheeses, so there must be something good about it. Be that as it may, I'm going to give you some of the scientific facts about dairy. Aside from the ones that I just mentioned, dairy is actually the second most common allergen after peanuts. So as you know, a lot of people have peanut allergies. Well, dairy is the second most common allergen. And it is also the biggest source of our saturated fat intake, which can cause saturated fat, if you don't know, can cause a whole host of other issues. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, and the breast, ovarian, and prostate cancers are all linked to high saturated fat intake. So there's that. I also wanted to let you know some of the symptoms about dairy. So if you're not sure if you're lactose intolerant or if you shouldn't be having dairy or if it's affecting you in any way, there are lots of symptoms that I'm going to list here. But here's the deal. A lot of us don't notice these symptoms until we've taken dairy out for a while. So for example, in my own dairy journey, I knew that from a young age that I couldn't have cheese, but I didn't know that I couldn't have yogurt and ice cream because I didn't really notice the symptoms as much. Part of that is like for yogurt, there's a lot of bacteria that helps digest the milk. I don't know why ice cream. Maybe it was just that I really liked ice cream. But so for those of us who don't necessarily notice an issue with dairy, it's probably best to take it out of your diet. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But if you take it out and then add it back, you might notice a change. So some of the symptoms that a lot of people experience from having dairy are bloating, IBS, gas and upset stomach. Oh, IBS is irritable bowel syndrome, if you aren't aware. Nausea, constipation, or diarrhea. Some people have acid reflux. As a matter of fact, one of the one of the food writers that I follow, who's an omnivore, he eats everything. He recently posted an article about how once he gave up dairy, he stopped having his acid reflux and heartburn, which I was astounded. I had never heard that dairy was linked to acid reflux and heartburn, but he says that he feels great, and it's not just him. He wrote the article with science to back it up, but that's another thing that you could get rid of if you're having that issue. I actually sent that article to my dad this morning because he has acid reflux. I'm like, hey, maybe you should give up the dairy. Plus, I got my lactose intolerance from somewhere. That's probably you. He denies it. Don't be a denier. So rashes, acne, and then dairy is one of the highly inflammatory foods. So any kind of inflammation, things like headaches, migraines, joint pain, what's it called? Good thing I wrote it down, huh? Arthritis, other inflammatory issues. And then because it's mucus forming, people who have respiratory issues are also affected by dairy. And that can also affect if you have asthma. So a lot of people should probably get rid of dairy, but the question is, how do I get rid of my dairy? Well, first, before I go into that, because I am going to go into that, I want to talk about the difference between European dairy and American dairy, because there is a big difference. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I lived in France, I didn't have an issue with a lot of the cheeses, which you would think I would, because I couldn't have cheese from a really young age. But there are a few reasons for that, and I'm going to list them. One is the cows. So in Europe, they use mostly Jersey cows, which are called A2 is the name for them. And in the US, we use A1 cows, which are Holsteins. And there is a genetic difference in the milk proteins and the amino acids that are linked to the milk proteins. And I don't want to get too sciencey on you, but essentially the Holstein milk protein is harder for people to digest than the Jersey milk protein. There are also a lot of stringent requirements in Europe for their food in general. As a matter of fact, no US milk products are allowed into Europe because they don't consider our regulations to be sufficient. So if that tells you anything, I mean, for one thing, our cows have a lot of hormones pumped into them, right? So the Holsteins that already have the more lactose intolerant prone proteins in them, they have hormones pumped into them to produce more milk. As a matter of fact, a cousin of mine who helped on the dairy farm, he lives in California now, and he took his kids to on this field trip to go see a dairy farm in California. And I think for some reason they went to two different ones. They went to an organic all natural dairy farm, and then they went to a regular, the kind we have all around where I live, where you just have this huge big expanse of dirt with a bunch of cows not looking so happy like the happy California cows look on the commercials. But he said that a normal cow will produce 5 pounds of milk a day, or 5 liters, it's probably liters, of milk a day. But the ones that have these hormones pumped into them produce 20 liters a day, and their udders are huge, dragging on the floor, huge, uncomfortable, huge. And I mean, that's pretty sad that we make these. I mean, not that I'm a huge animal person, but still, that seems like it kind of sucks for the cows, right? But two, the fact that we're then ingesting these hormones. The hormones don't go away, right? They come through the milk supply. As any mother knows, what you eat, the kid eats, right? When you're nursing. Same thing with the cows. Whatever they're ingesting, we're ingesting through the milk. So there's all those hormones, which for a lot of us women, especially those of us who are in our 40s and 50s, we're going through a big hormonal change anyway. And hormones can really affect everything from your sleep cycle to your digestion to your moods. And do we really need those extra hormones messing with our bodies, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they can pump antibiotics into these cows. So for one thing, a lot of these cows get sick because of the close quarters, because of the treatment and all that stuff. So they'll get sick, and the sickness, and sometimes there's this degenerative problem that causes blood to be passed in through the milk. That can be passed into our milk, which then we're getting. And that's if the people who are taking care of the cows notice that they're sick, which a lot of times they don't. But when they do, they give them a bunch of antibiotics. And a lot of times they just give them preventative antibiotics anyway. So again, we're getting antibiotics in our system, which is one of the reasons, not the entire reason, but one of the reasons a lot of us are more resistant to antibiotic treatment now is because we get antibiotics from everywhere, including in our dairy supply. So if you don't like a lot of antibiotics and hormones in your food, dairy is the first place to look. It's one of the places to look. We could talk a lot about this stuff, and I could go on all day, but let me just carry on. Okay, so we talked about the different kinds of cows. Oh, and I didn't mention, so the protein that the Holsteins have that the Jersey cows don't, that protein is 4 times more likely to cause lactose intolerance. And I talked about how much more milk the American cows generate. The other thing, okay, there are 2 more things. One is that American cows tend to be fed grain versus, a lot of them, you can find grass-fed products, but if they don't say grass-fed, if they don't say that they're grass-fed, they're usually fed grain. So wheat, soy, corn, all those things that are common allergens. So for someone like me who can't have gluten, like I'm really highly gluten intolerant, having products, again, it seeps through to the milk, right? So having milk products that have that wheat in them, that just kills me, in addition to all the lactose issues. So there's that. The other thing is that European products, they tend to leave more of the natural bacteria in the products, whereas we like to blitz everything. But because they leave more of the natural bacteria in them, it makes it easier to process. It makes it easier for us to digest. So as I was saying earlier, in my earlier example, hi Lisa, in my earlier example where I was talking about me being able to eat cheeses in France, well, it's possible that even though I have either little to no lactase that would normally break down the lactose, which is the milk, this is a substance in milk that our body needs to break down to digest it. Even though I have little to none of that, it's possible that because the French cheeses have a lot of natural bacteria in them, that they were aiding me in that digestion process and therefore allowing me to digest the cheese without any issues. So there's that. So moral of the story, we should all move to France. I'm just kidding. Much as I love the French. Okay, so now I know a lot of people are on specific diets, right? There's like the keto diet, the paleo diet, the Whole30, all that stuff. So when it comes to of those, I mean, Whole30 is good. I personally don't believe keto is healthy. It's basically the modern version of Atkins. And long term, it's actually pretty dangerous for us. And I could do a whole new live on that. Speaking of which, if you guys have any ideas of topics that you would like me to be doing a video on, please do let me know. Put it in the comments. But in terms of the paleo diet, which, if you are a true paleo, like, I don't want to say devout paleo, but if you're really into paleo, you know that the most pure version of paleo says that you shouldn't have milk products because the paleo ancestors they hadn't domesticated the animals and therefore they didn't have milk products. But there are some, there's no like paleo police, right? So there are some paleo followers who will include dairy into their diet with certain caveats. Here are the caveats. The cows have to be grass-fed. They have to be hormone-free. They have to be free of antibiotics. Let's see. Usually they're European. So like, for example, my husband who's paleo, he eats dairy products. He'll either have ghee, which is clarified butter where the milk fat is pulled off. And like for me, I can have ghee because essentially all it leaves is the fat, the oil. It has the milk part of it taken off. So it's actually a good source of buttery flavor for people who can't have dairy. But then when he buys butter, he buys it from Europe. Now, I recently read, because, I read all the food stuff, Martha Stewart likes the Kerrygold Irish butter. So if you're a Martha Stewart lover, she likes Kerrygold. It comes from Ireland. My husband gets ones that are either from France or Germany, but they're always grass-fed, hormone-free. Again, Europe has really high standards for their food because apparently they don't like getting sick and having all these chronic illnesses like we're okay with, right? So, also, if you're making sure you get grass-fed, then that means that the wheat isn't coming through the milk. And so for those of us who are trying to give up grains or just can't tolerate grains or wheat specifically, those you're not going to have that in the milk. So I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I'm telling you everything. Yes. Butter also is mostly milk fat. So like I can have a little bit of butter, especially if it's really only if it's the grass-fed butter, because milk fat actually has, that higher fat content has less of the casein in it, which is the part of the milk that we need the lactase to digest. Again, with all this science stuff, who knew I'd be into science? Okay, so my overall recommendations. If you don't know if you are lactose intolerant or if you are suffering from any issues regarding lactose or milk products, I would recommend giving it up for a month. Now, I know for some of you that can seem like oh my God, a whole month without dairy. It is a month of your whole life. I mean, think about how long. Let's hope, hopefully your life is really long. 1 month is not a big deal, especially given all of the dairy-free products we have now. I have two sisters, one of whom loves dairy, and she has been giving up. She's been doing it incrementally. So she's changed out her cream in her coffee she likes macadamia nut milk in her coffee now. I also tell people who like really creamy, thick milk in their coffee to do full fat coconut milk, because that has the mouthfeel of cream. It's also, you can use full fat coconut milk or coconut cream to make coconut whipped cream, which is amazing. You can also buy it some places, just FYI. Don't get me on that tangent because I love coconut whipped cream. But I would say if you're not sure, try giving it up for a month. Then after a month, add it back in, see how you feel. Because after a month, your body has been able to process, like it's kind of gotten used to not having it. And so when you put it back in, it's going to either react or not. And in my case, when I gave up yogurt, which I thought I could have, after that month, I started to notice this like gurgling feeling in my stomach. I also noticed when I gave up dairy that my acne started to go away, because I had had acne for years and years, and like adult acne, right? So if you like the cystic kind, dairy is not good for that. So I hope none of you are suffering with that, but if you are, you might want to try giving up dairy and see how you do. Let's see. Adding back in. Oh my gosh, there are so many different, like I said, if you really think you can't give up dairy, try adding it back in. And I would strongly suggest using the European cheeses, yogurts, any dairy products that are from Europe are going to have a higher level of scrutiny. And they're just, like I said, they're not going to have the hormones or the antibiotics, all that great stuff. Not great stuff. All that not great stuff. They're not going to have it in there. But also there are so many dairy-free cheeses, and I know a lot of you are probably going like, I roll with the dairy-free cheeses. There are actually good ones now. There are some. I had a get-together last fall, and I had a cashew cheese ball. You know how you can take the cheese and put it into a ball and like roll it in nuts or something? People did not believe me that it was not real cheese. So you just have to find one that you like, and especially if even if you're not in a big metropolitan area, but some of you are in a larger metropolitan area, you have so many choices. But even if you're not, there's a lot of stuff that I get on Amazon that I order from Thrive Market. There are a lot of different options for ordering stuff. And even my local, like the Target and the local grocery store, they have a lot of things I did not expect. A friend of mine recently, she lives in an even smaller town than I do. She said her local Target is carrying cashew milk yogurt, which is my personal favorite. It's a really creamy yogurt, and it was unsweetened, so you don't get the sugar. So there you go. And if you're worried about calcium, you can get calcium from a variety of plant sources. So milk is not the only way you can get calcium. Kale, broccoli, really dark leafy greens are an excellent source of calcium. So that is what I have to tell you about dairy, and perhaps things that you did not know about it. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments what you got out of it. If you're watching this on the replay, put #replay in the comments and let me know. Also, if you have any ideas for future videos, I am happy to hear them and see what I can do for you. So thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.